success in doing the same things we've been doing for years and years, and we have to do this differently. And under my leadership, we will, and we will have greater success in solving our problems, like the drug trafficking in Pioneer Park.
So Jackie's absolutely right. The way to address the problems we have around crime, and particularly the drug dealing, which is just rampant, has been rampant in that area, is to form partnerships. And the Salt Lake City Police has actually worked with the sheriff, who's responsible for the jails, has worked with the district attorney, CEO, has worked with the judges, so that we set up a comprehensive approach for the criminal justice system to address crime in that area. We've also involved law enforcement from all over the valley and the region. The other point that's important is the federal government has tremendous information they share with us, and we work right up the line, because if we just address the drug dealers on the street, we know we're not going to solve this problem. So we're working up the line to the drug cartels themselves in a comprehensive city, national, and international approach to address these issues. We do need to work together, and that's what Salt Lake City is doing.
Start with Jackie. What plans, if any, do you have to ensure the refugee population is integrated into all neighborhoods of the city?
Well, and honestly, even just beyond the refugee population, I think all of our ethnic minorities that are living here are not being incorporated into our city as a whole. I'm witnessing, and I'm sure you are as well, that we are a very divided community, and unnecessarily so. I've been working with the refugee population now for years. I do a program with the Office of the Sheriff, and part of that program was really to do outreach, to help refugees who come here understand the laws so that they could be successful and not end up in our jail making mistakes that are simply being made because they don't know the laws of the land. Those programs have expanded, and they include now gang information. We do domestic violence training, and what I am certain of is if we do development in our city, especially housing development, in a different fashion than we are today, that we can create a community that is very inviting to all people. And we have a deficit right now of 8,000 housing units for low-income people. And we know that when the refugee population comes into our community, having the financial means to be successful is a barrier. We have an obligation to our community and to those who end up homeless and needlessly so, to make sure we are creating the housing stock that we need in the city. And that means developing more low-income housing.
Salt Lake City, Utah, are a refugee resettlement city, one of just a few number in the United States. And we receive over 1,000 refugees a year, and we have over 50,000 refugees in the Salt Lake area. Folks who are refugees are coming here because in their countries they have been the victims of horrible circumstances. And it is so important that we welcome them, that we include them, and we help them assimilate and be successful in our society. Many of these folks come here not only with language difficulties, but just basic understandings of what we take for granted every day in our societies. When we saw our refugee populations in Salt Lake City, particularly in the Salt Lake area, we're not getting what we felt was sufficient attention. We added in my office a full-time refugee coordinator who reaches out to the dozens of refugee communities and looks at how we can help them understand what our laws are, help them understand what their rights are, help them understand how to get access to health care, help them understand get access to food and housing and shelter. And it's making a huge difference. But you know, we live in such a privileged world, those of us who were born and raised in this country and in this city. And it takes a whole community. And I'm really pleased that in Salt Lake we have a very generous and welcoming community. But we all need to do more. And my wife is with me, Kate. It is her #1 devotion. And Suzanne is with her, who's a refugee here. She's always looking out to find furnishings and kitchen items and whatever it can do to help his community be well integrated and have a higher quality life as they join our country.
You know, our city has become what many are saying is gentrified. We are developing our city, especially in the downtown area, in a fashion that is really not welcoming of people who are low income, who are people with disabilities. We aren't doing anything in the downtown area that really embraces our ethnic differences and our culture. We speak 127 languages in Salt Lake City. If you go downtown, do you even know that? I mean, is there anything happening in our community that really is embracing and celebrating how diverse we really are? And I think that's a missed opportunity and something that I will change as I move into leadership. We will make sure that everyone is celebrated in this community, and we will bring forward cultural experiences that we don't have today.
And we will start with Mayor Becker. What is your plan for improving not only public transportation in Salt Lake City, but also general ease of getting around?
So the heart of, I think, the circulation system and our ability to enjoy each other in all of our neighborhoods and downtown and the region is to have a good transportation system, and particularly good transit. And we are known actually around the country, we're the envy of virtually every city around the country for what's happened with the rail development. And the most recent rail line for us out to the airport is one that I work very hard on with all of you in this community to add an additional opportunity for everyone to be able to get around. What we need now is we need to improve service, and particularly bus service, or in the transit world, as they say, the last mile. Because we know that we don't have the coverage we need geographically, we don't have the frequency of service, and we don't have the hours of operation to serve people's needs. We're going to have an opportunity in this election. It's Proposition 1. The legislature authorized counties to put a tax on for local transportation, some for roads, some for transit. And with that money, we will have an opportunity, and particularly Utah Transit Authority, and we working with Utah Transit Authority, to tremendously improve service. And the focus in UTA's plan is almost entirely on service. We get good transit. It means that it's easier for us to get around and not necessarily own a car to be able to get everywhere. It means we're improving our air quality because there are lower vehicular emissions. It means our neighborhoods and our downtown are better connected. So we have a series of plans. We're working on a transit plan in Salt Lake City to help us figure out exactly what we need. It follows on a pedestrian and bike plan. It follows on a transportation plan for the city as a whole. And I'm very hopeful that with the resources that we get and with Utah Transit Authority gets, we're really going to be able to improve transit service in Salt Lake City if we pass this bond this election for the quarter-cent sales tax increase this year.
So I think it's very unfortunate that we have not had a transportation plan and that we're working on one finally, because had we done one years ago, we would know exactly where the holes are and what needed to happen. UTA is a regional transit service. not our local service. They're doing what they can to create service for a local government entity and the people who live here. But they're regional. And in the last 8 years, we have not been able to get the service we need from them. And that's why I'm saying to you, it's time we look at creating our own local bus service, just like Park City does, and consider taking that opportunity to make sure that we are generating the service we need in this city. The tax, I think, is important. I believe that we really need to pass that. And I know that will be hard for some people who live on a very, very tight budget, and I understand that. But if we are going to maximize the current service that we get from UTA, that tax is the way to do it. They're not going to expand service. So if you live in a neighborhood like up above the Capitol, you're not all of a sudden going to get bus service out of this. That won't happen. But in a neighborhood where there's current service, we'll extend those hours is what UTA is saying, so that you can get to and from work. And I think that's a win and worth pursuing. But we absolutely have to have a transit plan for our city. It needs to include the bikes, it needs to include the trains, it needs to include buses, it needs to include pedestrians and cars. And that needs to be a priority, number one, before we just keep doing arbitrary decision-making around transit.
So Salt Lake City not only has a transportation plan, we have a bike and pedestrian plan and a trails plan. We have a downtown transportation plan called Downtown in Motion. And your neighborhood plan, the West Side plan, has a major component around what we need to do to improve transportation in your area and to tie in with the rest of the city. Jackie talks about establishing a city transit system. That means establishing a whole new bureaucracy, which all of us will have to pay for. Instead, what I propose is we take that money and put it into transit service. UTA will provide this service for us as they do today. And we can use their resources, instead of putting it in our money into building a new big bureaucracy, we can put that money into improving transit service. And then we'll be much further ahead in Salt Lake City.
Look, we're moving into a time in our life where we have more seniors than we've ever had. And that's not going to change in a very short window here. If we don't develop a bus system, our seniors won't be downtown. They won't be. They don't like our meters. They're frustrated with those. They have to pay extra long to park downtown just to eat dinner. Our city is for everybody. And UTA has been very clear. They will not expand additional services. They will enhance current services. Those are two very different things. And we have a choice. And you will get to decide this. Not me, you. And I'd be curious, how many people in this room have said anything about a transit plan on this side of the city at any meeting that was implemented by the city? Probably nobody. They're accessible. My point was, people have not been able to have input in their own neighborhoods on what those plans should look like. That is my point, and I think it's very imperative that you have some say on what they look like. We're doing really well on time, so I'll allow some time for questions at the end. And this time I will start with Jackie. What are, sorry,
The city's golf enterprise fund is currently unsustainable. What plan do you have to make it sustainable into the future?
Yeah, you know, the Golf Enterprise Fund has been managed for quite some time. Multiple ideas have been brought to the administration to make it more viable. And all of those opportunities to create a real strong business plan for the Golf Enterprise were all turned down. And I think that's extremely unfortunate. The Golf Enterprise Fund was essentially driven into the ground. And the other component to this is we should have been using secondary water on the golf courses on this side of our city for a long time now because it's accessible, and all we needed to do was to put the money forward to actually make that happen. It's harder to get secondary water for a golf course like Bonneville, but over here we should have been using it instead of culinary, and the amount of money being charged for that water is extreme. So we have a real, I think, obligation to this community, which is very committed to the Glendale Golf Course staying open, to make sure that we do transition from culinary water to secondary water. And I am committed to making sure we do that. But the other element to this is also being supportive of the youth programs that are out here. We have youth programs from the different universities in our community that come here to train and educate kids on how to be good golfers. And it's part of a great program, and it has created heroes, you know, who are on the tour right now that grew up here playing golf. We have an opportunity to support that, and I think we should.
From the time I came into office 8 years ago, I learned that our golf course enterprise fund, as it's been described, which is a separate fund to support golf, was losing money and had been losing money for years. Golf use has been going down in the Salt Lake area as it has all around the country. We spent years, studies being done locally, studies being done nationally, reaching out to the community, working with our golf advisory board, trying to figure out ways to change that picture. But the reality is that golf course use was going down, which pays for the maintenance and operation of the courses, and we're now losing money, have been losing money over $1 million a year. We've run out of our reserve funds. 3 years ago, I brought that to the city council. They were aware of this, it was all part of our budgets. We brought it to the city council and said, you know, we've got to do something dramatically different here because this fund has to balance. The funds have to balance. And they said, we think we can figure this out. So I said, great. So they initiated their own studies, they reached out into the community like we had done, they consulted with everybody in the world, did their own separate national studies, and this year they came to the conclusion, after we'd sort of been doing patchwork Band-Aid stuff to keep the golf courses open, that it just wasn't going to work. And so we had to come to the conclusion we had to change some things, and that's what we've done. Now, secondary water is incredibly important for us because it allows the water that we pay to become culinary water to get treated. It allows it to go further. Here's the reason we haven't been using secondary water on golf courses. You've got to develop a system, a water system for that secondary water and put it into play. And the golf course fund has not had the money to do it. As part of the proposals we have going forward for a complete redoing with the City Council of our parks and recreation and golf, there would be a lot of secondary water put into play as part of that investment.
Won't it cost $3.3 million a year to a park to maintain it?
We'll have time for questions in just a moment. Just so you know, Glendale is not a golf course that loses money. They make money, they've been profitable, and they're used all over, by people all over this county. That is a golf course that I think deserves the recognition for the job they're doing to maintain their ability to operate the way they do. It's interesting that we, can't find a way to use secondary water for that golf course when it would have been very easy to do so had we done the bond and turned it into a very large nature park. And I think as a city, we have the ability to make decisions that make sense for this whole community, and we'll find our way to do the secondary water. And I think that's something that we can get through. There's no doubt.
I really wish Jackie was right. Golfing is a great sport, and I'm maybe one of the few people in this room that actually enjoys watching golf on TV. But the reality is, the whole city, the city council, our golf advisory board, all of our folks who work in it, and I ultimately came to the conclusion that we cannot continue to lose money at the rate we're doing. By 2020, the estimate is it would be $20 million. And we can't do that. We can't plug that hole. So we have to make some changes. And the changes that we came about, the city council and I, was let's take advantage of this open space for a golf course that we have to close and make it into a wonderful neighborhood open space for all kinds of other uses, not just golf. So we've got trails, we've got more play facilities, we take advantage of the Jordan River, we do all kinds of things that can provide a regional draw and a wonderful neighborhood opportunity for all kinds of recreational uses.
Next question, we'll start with Mayor Becker. Recently, the administration, at the behest of the City Council, floated a $150 million parks bond. What are the city's green space needs currently, and should we bond for those needs?
Yeah, thank you. So I mentioned that when we saw we just couldn't continue the way we were with our golf courses, we thought, you know what? We should take a look at all of our parks and recreation needs and open space needs for the city. These parks that we have today were built decades and decades ago, and people's needs and desires change today. You know what the number one use people want to do? They want to get out on trails, on their bikes, walking, running. People want, the games we play have changed. You know, now people want to play soccer and rugby and lacrosse and other sports. So, and we want to improve our trails. So we worked with the city council for months to put together a proposal that would go, let's make Salt Lake City the